So I used to be the person who couldn't hear it. The person in the toxic, abusive situation who wouldn't leave no matter how many red flags there were, and how much others gently tried to help me see. Mind you, I didn't talk in depth about my relationship to anyone. Even though my logic brain didn't call it what it is, my subconscious said, like, if you talk about it, they'll know. It'll be real. And more than a few times about me making content about healing from abuse or healing from trauma and what that looks like, a lot of people have been like, oh, like I have a friend who is starting to realize they're in a toxic situation, or I didn't know that all of this was common, or like I thought it was just me. Like women specifically would be in situations and think that they're alone. I felt alone. I've also had people reach out and ask me, like, how do you help, like, your friend or your mom or your loved one see that they're in this situation? Now, this is definitely going to be a trigger warning. Check in with yourself. If you're not mentally or emotionally in the space to listen to this about abuse, abusive situations, how to get out of it, then maybe you decide whether or not this is the best time for you to listen to this. Okay. I want everybody to be healthy. This episode is kind of for my past self and for anyone, especially women, who might need like a compassionate outside perspective to help them see the truth and find their strength. This podcast is for anyone who is in the process of becoming. I hope that whoever is meant to hear what I have to say is listening, but as always, all the cunts to the front. So just to preface this, I am not a licensed therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a coach. I am just a woman who has experienced abusive behavior, toxic behavior, manipulative and toxic abusive situations, and left. At 29, I started over at zero. And I mean every sense of the word, like $0 in my bank account, zero assets, like credit debt of over $10,000 from survivorship period, and moving into like a really tiny renting a room that only had like a twin bed in it, and I could barely fit like a yoga mat on the ground. Like that's how much space I had, like zero. But right now, I'm 34. I'm happy. I'm whole. No one fucks with my peace. And my intention here is to help other people, especially women, and nudge them to trust their inner knowing. So, this first portion of the episode is entitled Something Smells. A lot of people don't realize that they're in a toxic or abusive relationships because the signs can be really fucking subtle at first. It's rarely ever one big moment or one big bad thing. It is gradual. That's how they work. It's like these little things happen and you're like, oh, that wasn't blatantly bad, but that didn't feel good either, AKA subtle red flags. Because emotional manipulation starts out quietly. It begins quietly. There's small behaviors that often feel off, but they're kind of easy to brush off. And I'm going to give you some examples, a lot of examples actually right now. So there's like the constant testing you. They're testing you for your loyalty or to prove your love, saying things like, if you really cared, blank, like talking you out of going to be social and seeing your friends. Like, oh, if you really loved me, why don't you just stay in tonight? Why don't you just blow them off? Why don't you just stay with me? Then there's the subtle controlling of decisions, AKA offhand comments that are basically like questioning your decisions or your obligations that you have, like how you spend your free time, who you see in the example that I just gave, like asking things like, do you really need to do that? Do you need to do that right now? I know you need to finish this project, but why don't you get up early in the morning and why don't we stay up late? Drinking and watching a movie, just talking you out of your obligations because they're making themselves more important. Ooh, and then there's hot and cold behavior that keeps you going back for more. They can be affectionate and then distant without any reason whatsoever. And that keeps you in confusion and seeking their affection, which creates this cycle. So it's like withholding affection and attention and saying things like, I need some space right now, when there's like They're almost like feigning like therapy terms and boundaries, but it's manipulation. Then there's guilt tripping and framing your boundaries and emotional needs as selfish. Like a healthy person would say like, "Hey, I'm really overwhelmed. I need to spend the night alone. I need to recharge, hope you understand that." And a healthy partner would be like, "I totally understand. Like take some time to yourself." But an unhealthy, abusive, emotionally manipulative partner would say like, "I guess I'm not as important as your time alone." So, okay. And then there's the criticism dressed up as compliments, like backhanded compliments, because the goal is to make you unsure about like your appearance, your intelligence, your abilities. So they say things like, "You're beautiful. You'd be more attractive if blank," or like, "You're really smart. I'm surprised you're into this hobby." Like, just they're all backhanded. They're all to take a dig at you, to make you question your self, your interests. And then there's the invalidating your feelings combined with this like subtle gaslighting. Like you're too sensitive. You're overreacting. And all of that is what they say when you're just expressing how you feel, which is a healthy thing to do. Let's not forget the love bombing that can occur at the very beginning. Showering you with compliments. "I can't believe I met someone like you." Buying you gifts, going on elaborate dates, expressing deep emotional attachment way too quickly, like, "I think I'm falling in love with you," after like the second date. They text and call excessively to make you feel like you are always on their mind. Or they talk about future plans really early on, like moving in together, or saying things like, "I think you're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with," in the first month or two. Another subtle red flag is like when they create situations where they make you feel like you have to defend yourself. Like you're constantly having to justify your actions yourself. For example, they try to text you, you're at work, you're in a meeting, you're doing all this stuff, and they get mad and they're like, "Why didn't you answer my text?" And you're like, "I was in a meeting. I was at work. I was working." And they're like, "You can still take a minute and get back to me even though your phone was on airplane mode and you're probably in crisis mode for the 3 hours being at work." Like they give you a hard time for very simple things. So those were quiet beginnings for those people, right? What about how you feel? What to look out for in yourself? These are kind of early warning signs for the person going through it, the person experiencing that manipulation or gaslighting or mental abuse. Are you walking on eggshells? AKA, are you overly concerned about their moods, their reactions to things? You might start minimizing your own needs, your boundaries. And one of the biggest things for me now that I pay attention to my energy, I pay such close attention to my energy, is you feel drained after interactions or exhausted. And let's not forget, you frequently make excuses for their behavior, for their shitty fucking behavior. I experienced all this shit. And before I share like the first portion of that with you, I do want to share some statistics about this stuff. So I looked into some research, and statistically, on average, it takes women about 7 attempts to leave an emotionally abusive or toxic relationship permanently. Statistically, isolation is a big part of it. So abusers often isolate the partner from their support systems, making it harder to seek help or leave. That was me too. Another statistic says 90% of women report post separation abuse. I experienced that as well. And I'll tell you what I would have done differently so that wouldn't have happened. And based on research, the common barriers to leaving include emotional manipulation, trauma bonds, fear for personal safety, financial dependence, and concerns for children's well being if the children are in the picture. Now, my experience, I had injured instincts and then was gaslit into ignoring what little instincts I had left. So if I felt something was off, I completely doubted myself and I thought I could just brush it off, and I did. It was definitely gradual, like I just talked about, like, it was definitely gradual. It was textbook narcissistic abusive behavior, emotional abuse, mental abuse, like, emotional manipulation, all of it. It started off small, though, I wouldn't have just been like, "Oh, this is a piece of shit. I want to date this person." No, it's gradual. They're amazing. They're charming, all these wonderful things, and then it slowly starts changing. He love bombed the shit out of me, and I was like, "Oh my god, I am just like so amazing. They get it." No. He was like, "Never met anyone like me. I'm so positive. I'm so full of life, bringing me gifts, bringing me food. If I did like this hard workout and I shared that with them and I was like, "Oh, I didn't eat yet." He would just show up with food and I was like, "Oh my god, thoughtful." But now I'm like, "I did not ask you to come over here." He took me on elaborate dates around LA, pursued me really hard. I was like a health coach at the time and I led workouts and he came to all the workouts. And it was definitely not even a year in, suggested we like move in together. And then there was like interrupting me and slowly started interrupting me more. Initially, I'd be like, "I'm still talking." And be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry. Keep going." But, or "I'm sorry, but," like it started, like he started interrupting me more frequently, got more comfortable telling me what I should think. That's subtle control. That's like subtle red flags starting to try to control me. Started emphasizing, like, talking about our relationship, like, our business is our business, like, gossiping is for, like, bored people, like, that was manipulation, that was, like, grooming me into isolation. Although I do think to an extent, like, in a healthy relationship, your business is your business, it's not anybody else, and if there's a problem, you go to your partner first, and friends are there to support you, of course, but, like, this is a toxic situation. And if one thing like annoyed me about a friend, which is normal, and like a healthy partner would be like, "Have you talked to them about it? Do they know that is annoying you? Maybe you should talk it out." This person dug his heels in and was like, we can't trust anyone. We can only trust each other." And that was further isolation. He started showing his frustration more. Um, he had road rage like I've never seen before in my life. It became louder, it became more aggressive. He started tossing things around the house, but it was like kind of just tossing, and I was like, "Oh, okay, you're acting like a child, but that's fine." It wasn't fine. It was the beginning of something. I started making excuses for his behavior. I started doubting my own instincts. I started getting more tired. And I should have known, but I just didn't at the time. I didn't know myself well enough at the time. I started not arguing back because it made him yell more. So I kind of stopped putting up a fight to try to protect my peace, but peace wasn't really existent. He would overact to me sharing my feelings, and then he would go hot and cold. So his like withdrawal of affection would lead me to being scared to share anything at all. But I thought I could love him back to how he was, how he acted, um, for the first year, but really it's like I was trying to love him into back to the fake version he showed me, to the person he pretended to be for a fucking year. And I would like surface level speak to family and friends and have horrible feedback from a lot of people. Men are babies sometimes, they just throw fits. Relationships are supposed to be hard. Relationships are all about compromise. So I gaslit myself to be like, "Okay, it could be worse. It could always be worse. At least he's not blank. At least there's not blank. At least blank." Like, I did a whole episode on hurt hierarchy and like suffering comparison and how unhealthy that is, by the way. These are some reflective questions for kind of this stage of that kind of relationship, maybe to give to yourself or to someone you know. I wish I had them in my journal at the time. So, one is, am I adjusting my personality, appearance, or interests to avoid conflict or to gain their approval? If someone treated a loved one the way that I'm being treated right now, would I be okay with it? What do you tell yourself when something feels off? Do you push it to the side or do you explore it? How often do I feel anxious, confused, or like I'm not enough when I'm around this person? So, you know how the first portion of the episode was called, "What's That Smell?" This portion of the episode I call, "Oh, it's me. I'm standing in shit." So, just like things in a toxic or abusive situation, relationship, what have you, can be very gradual, Realization is kind of the same way most of the time. It unfolds gradually. For me, it was kind of like putting small, painful pieces together and then like your eyes widening and you see it forming into a large, unavoidable picture. Because at some point, the patterns of that harmful behavior become apparent, they become loud, unignorable, undeniable. So I'm going to give you some examples of how like small incidents can turn into patterns. The dismissive comments start to pile up. Things like, "Are you really going to wear that?" Or like, "I thought you knew how to cook." Things like that. Those start to become more frequent. Comments that are meant to erode your confidence. Then there's the good old emotional withdrawal, the like silent treatment after a disagreement with zero explanation. That becomes a go to response anytime that they're upset. Then you have controlling behaviors like isolation. And that usually happens through like innocent sounding requests, like we only need each other, or they like suggest you skip hanging out with your friends because they're gonna miss you too much. Then there's the classic gaslighting to create self doubt, saying things like, "I never said that," "You're crazy," or "You're imagining things," like saying all of those types of comments or sayings like that becomes continued behavior. And it makes you doubt your own memory or instincts. Then some more emotional playground, withdrawing attention after you express a need. And over time, you start to feel fear of bringing up your needs because you don't want to lose their affection. This starts repeating itself. You start seeing the pattern. You start not just smelling the shit, you see the shit. So I looked into like psychologically, why does it take so much time to like recognize abuse and call it what it is? And I found a model and a theory that kind of explains it. There's cognitive dissonance and trauma bonding. Cognitive dissonance is like the psychological discomfort due to holding like two conflicting beliefs, values, or perceptions at once. So in this case, it's like the struggle between wanting to believe the relationship is good and seeing evidence that it's not. Hence the justifications that you make. Oh, they didn't mean it. It's a rough patch. Boys will be boys. Ugh, vomit. Then you have trauma bonding, or what I also say is a wound mate. And trauma bonding is like the deep emotional attachment that forms between the person and their abuser. And it's usually because it's like the cycle of abuse followed by affection, reconciliation, then abuse, affection, reconciliation. And the trauma bonding situation creates that emotional dependence from the cycle that I just mentioned. So both cognitive dissonance and like the trauma bonding model delay recognizing or labeling the behavior for what it is. Manipulation, abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, like that's what happens. So I'm going to tell you how I started noticing this shit. But first I have a couple, like some suggestions for navigating the stage. Ask yourself questions about patterns, like start recognizing the patterns. What keeps happening that makes you feel drained? What keeps happening to make you feel anxious or unsafe? I highly recommend journaling and documenting incidents because writing them down actually helps you like bypass mental fog. And that mental fog is usually created by the manipulation. So writing it down really helps you bypass that. And I suggest you do something that I did not do that I wish that I did. Confide in someone, in a trusted friend or a professional, because sometimes seeing it through somebody else's lens is necessary. And God, I wish I did that. I was so alone. I felt so alone. That's one of the main intentions behind me making content and a lot of healing content and meditations because I don't want anyone to feel as alone as I did, you know? So the moments that it started to click for me, remember when I mentioned he like started tossing things around the apartment? Yeah, that turned into full blown throwing things against walls, breaking things around the house, like picking up and slamming the corner of tables. He started punching holes in walls and breaking doors. And the objects that he threw used to be like glasses or like cups or something. And they started off being thrown at like walls, okay? But slowly over some time, those objects, instead of being thrown at walls, slowly started getting closer to like where it was standing, like closer to my body. So I have this relationship with my soul that I can see in my eyes. When I'm doing well, when I'm happy, when I'm whole, I can see this life in my eyes. My beautiful brown eyes are happy and almost like glowing. I would see my like reflection even in my like car door window when I was driving, even if it was dark out, and I would smile, or I see my reflection in the mirror or in pictures. Like I can see it very clearly as a part of my soul, my eyes. Then I started to see this like dampness. I started to see a fog in my reflection, like something was missing in my eyes. They turned like this dark, flat, brown, like they became so dark. And I started looking away from my reflection. I started avoiding my journal, which is one of the biggest red flag signs for my own behavior because I have journaled since I think I was like 9 or 10, like monthly, if not weekly. So both consciously and subconsciously, I knew something was up. I never confided in someone all that was happening because I think I was embarrassed. Like, I'm this strong, confident woman. I'm not that woman. I'm not the woman who tolerates someone throwing fucking glasses and breaking shit in a home and slamming doors and making me feel like shit. And like, I'm not that woman. Like, the thing is, movies um suck because they make people who or women who are in like abusive situations look like shit. Like they make them like garbage people, trashy. And that's just not how it is. It happens everywhere all the time. It's astounding. So, but in my brain I was like, I'm not that woman. I can't, that's not me. I can't tell anybody about the shit. No. Mm, toxic ego, cultural ego. And when I journaled, even like the few words that I wrote and then would like slam it shut, I could like tell like the fatigue was present. The fatigue showed. My gut knew, but my brain avoided acknowledging like the truth. We had dogs together. Financially, we were linked. You know, I had nowhere to go. My family was 2,000 miles away. I'm an adult. Like, I was 28. This is like 25 through 28, 24 through 28, my age for that. And I was like, I'm an adult. I'm not going to ask my parents for money. So at the time, I was like, not ready to act on it at all. But I knew I didn't feel safe anymore. And I started to plan. So, again, for this portion of it, I have some reflective questions that someone could ask themselves. What would your life look like if this pattern continued for another 5 years? What does your body feel like when you're around them? Is it tense? Is it relaxed? Or are you on fucking edge? Are you making compromises or sacrifices in the relationship? Because you could be making more sacrifices than compromises in a relationship. That's unhealthy. Now, the third and final portion of this episode, I call fresh air, cleaning it up and throwing it out. So I did some research and looked at like why it's hard to find the courage to leave. Are there statistics around this? Like, what is it about this that makes it so hard? So again, there was that one statistic. Remember, I said it takes women 7 attempts to leave permanently. So here are some reasons why people stay via statistics, and a lot of them are due to fear, different kinds of fear. You have cultural expectations of loyalty and sacrifice. So that can make you feel like a failure for leaving. There's familial pressure to maintain appearances, which is all about avoiding embarrassment and shame. There's the fear of financial instability and dependence on a partner for financial or like housing stability can make leaving feel fucking impossible, like an impossible option. Then there's good old fashioned guilt for breaking up a family, which could be like, it could include extended family, animals, friend groups, children if they're in the picture. You have like the fear of disrupting children's lives or even of just like dismantling shared dreams with that person. And that usually keeps people stuck despite ongoing like emotional, mental, or physical harm. Something else that popped up from research is the fear of uncertainty. It said sometimes the fear of not knowing what comes next can feel more overwhelming than the pain of staying. Mm. Leaving isn't easy. For me, it feels like grieving. It really does. Because even if they're a piece of shit and it wasn't all bad, obviously, because they were charming at one point and there's probably real love there, which turned into a trauma bond. Um, they were your person, especially if there was isolation. If even if they were shit, they were your person for however long the length of time was that you spent with them. So it's like grieving both the relationship and the person that you hoped they could be or pretended to be. Let's be real. And for me, that list of like why it's hard for people to leave, like based on research, check, 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 check. I had fear of feeling like a failure because I did. I felt like one. I had a shit ton of shame because I was like, I'm this confident woman. How the fuck is this happening to me? I'm not that woman, quote unquote. There was fear of uncertainty, like check, check, check. We had dogs together, and one of them, she was my girl. She was my little girl. She protected me. She used to sit in front of me and face him, or if he wasn't there, she'd sit and she'd just look into my soul. It seemed like her eyes, she'd keep her eyes right, like connected with mine. She was just staring into my eyes with love. My parents talked to me, like had a talk with me specifically at one point during like this relationship. Um, Told me I was different. My dad told me I was a different person and I was angrier. And I wasn't being myself. And I couldn't hear it. I didn't want to hear it. I was like, okay. I think at one point in the conversation, I was like, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I'm glad that he talked to me. I'm really glad he talked to me. But at the beginning of that conversation, I didn't want to hear it. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be told like something's wrong, even though it was true. And if my family started like not to recognize me, I didn't start to recognize myself. The melanin in my skin, it was fucking gone. It's wild what like depression and this shit can cause. I had acne from chronic stress and eggshell walking. Even my hair was tired. It was like stringy, it was lifeless. And because I was so tired, I went to this naturopathic doctor, which she was also a psychologist. Um, and I basically realized that I was depressed. I wasn't like, oh, something's wrong with my body. I'm just so tired all the time. I was depressed and acknowledged my unhappiness. I'm really grateful I went to that doctor. I also got a reading from my now friend. Her name is Jax. She's a sixth generation shamanic healer, Asian shamanic healer, medium psychic. Okay. And, you know, I know some people are like, oh God, psychic. No, she read me. I never met her before. It was like through someone else at that point. I never met her. I was like, yeah, I want to do this and invest this in myself. And I remember leaving my house to go to a cafe, put headphones in, and I think I don't know if I like cried in front of a bunch of people while I was on this call, but um it was a few months before the breakup. It was like the final years, like the final stretch of it. And she was just like, there's no light coming from you. Like out of your crown chakra, where this beautiful, like, you know, you should be connected and light should be coming out. She was like, it stops, it's out. And she brought up, she was like, I think you've been depressed. And I was like, yeah, I've been feeling depressed lately. She was like, no, 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 for like years, for a long time. Again, did not know this person at all. This was a phone call and recommended by somebody else. I had no idea we're friends now, but like she didn't know me. I didn't know her, laid my shit out flat. And she was like, something happened. You were like on the right path like 4+ years ago, but something happened. And I was like, I met that person. That's what happened. And all of these things started like just falling together and getting heavier and heavier. Like it felt like, you know how it felt like a bucket of sand. When at first it's just a few grains of sand, it's light, and the more and more it pours, the heavier and heavier and heavier it gets. That's how it felt, like it was pouring on my chest and stayed there for years. And eventually I was like, like my whole body just said no. My whole body said, no, this will not be my life. This is not my path. Fuck this. I guess you could call it my turning point. Whatever it is, it took 5 years for me. I think I knew my 29th birthday was coming. And at one point, after him ruining like Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's Eve for fourth year in a row, every fucking holiday was ruined. I was just like, this fucker doesn't get my birthday. No. I started to hide money. I made tips for my job at the time. I had enormous debt, largely due to him and uh, him insisting that we like travel. And then if we did travel, it had to be the most expensive option. And then when we did, we couldn't just go in our clothes that we already had. We had to go shopping for whole new clothes and max out my credit card and my store card and, oh, get a line of credit when I didn't even know what that was at the time. Oh, it was bad. So the breakup happened in January. I moved out before the 1st of March. My birthday is in March. Before the 1st of March in 2020, right before the pandemic hit. Thank you, universe, oh great creator of the world. Then I acquired more debt in my survivorship period. And like I mentioned earlier, like statistically, abuse happens after leaving. That did also happen to me. Because he manipulated me emotionally because we had dogs, we shared dogs. And I wish I would have at the time just taken my dog, just been like, okay, I'm going to take her for a walk and left and never came back because I moved and he didn't know where I lived at the time. I was stalked. Used to show up at my job. I used to take so many different like roads and ways back home. I used to check my mirror all the time, constantly. I was hyper vigilant. This is not funny, but I'm just like, now it's like, Jesus, that was a lot. That was bad. It was bad. So he'd manipulate me through the love for my dogs. He would be like, I have to work, this crazy late night or something like that. Can you go take care of them? I had a key, so I would go and then he would show up. So he lied to manipulate me to get me there. And a few times blocked me from leaving, blocked my exit, dragged me back inside one time, like pulled me back, like physically put his hands on me and like we even like fell down. And I remember saying out loud, get your hands off me. And he was standing there and he was like, we were together for however many years. If I want to touch you, I'll touch you. And he like grabbed my arm really hard. One time he broke a wooden gate that I was trying to leave. Yeah. Yeah. So, God, thing is, I wish one of two things were different. I either would have taken my dog and gone if I had a place where I could have a dog. And um, the weird thing is, I knew he would never hurt the dog. So at one point, I should have also just said goodbye and never looked back. But I loved my dog too much and he used it against me. So know that if there's anything, anything that they will use to manipulate you to keep some clause in you, they will. And honestly, the year following leaving was really fucking hard. Really fucking hard because it was the first time that I actually realized everything that happened to me was called abuse. I didn't call it this at the time. I was like, this is horrible. I gotta leave. So the year following is like, that's when I identified everything. And it was wild because it was like, I'm free. I feel more free. And then the weight comes down again and you're like, oh, this was really bad. This is abuse. This was abuse. Um, what I wish I would have done differently is change my number immediately, taken my dog, and go absolutely no contact. I was manipulated because of my dogs to like come visit them. He would guilt trip me. I would feel horrible because I raised them. I love them. They're my humans, my soul connecting beautiful things. And in the room I moved into at the time, I couldn't have a dog. And I don't know. I wish I stole her and never spoke to me again. I wish I had changed my number sooner. It took me years because I was just like, this fucker doesn't get to make me change shit. But you know what? It's worth the peace. I would have done that differently. Would have taken my dog, would have gone cold turkey, would have changed my number sooner. Mhm. So again, this is the year after leaving, identifying what was happening. That was hard. You also have more freedom. You're like, oh my God, I'm alive. I'm free. I'm starting to know myself. And a lot of other darker shit identifying this happens. But now here's the beautiful light. I started to come alive again. My eyes started to lighten. I got these 2 piercings that I wanted for years and I just never acted on. I saw girlfriends every single week, went and worked with like earth and water elements. Like we went to the beach and meet up every single week and it was hot until like 9, 10 p.m. We'd stay on the beach and just like swim or work out and just sit with friends and it was so healing. I was running from my mental health instead of escaping my reality. I had this reintroduction to peace. And I started journaling more frequently. Again, everything was getting better and lighter, and I felt more whole, and it was beautiful. And it's beautiful right now. Like how I mentioned what I would have done differently, I also looked at research of what can help people leave. And what came up was like studies showed that like building a support system and developing an exit plan increases the likelihood of safely leaving. So studies showed that both informal and formal support systems play a critical role in promoting a person's decision to leave. So formal being like counselors and shelters, informal being like friends and family. It also said that exit plans increase safety. So that includes like knowing the safe places to go, getting all of your important documents together, getting emergency funds together. So studies show that women who engage in safety planning and have access to supportive resources report higher self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the belief in your ability to be able to do something, to be able to successfully complete a task. And with all of that planning, they're more likely to leave permanently without returning to the abuser. Now, remember, this portion is entitled Fresh Air. Clean it up and throw it out. So, here are some tips for building courage to leave. Now, I kind of just talked about this, but create a coven. What do I mean? A supportive network. Reach out to friends, reach out to families, reach out to a professional, and come clean. Remember, clean it up and throw it out. Come clean about the shit. Label the shit for what it is. Take those beautiful small steps and reclaim the parts of your identity. Get into the hobbies that you haven't done for fucking years or months or however long. Do self-care, real nurturing self-care, time in nature, maybe going to a all women's day spa. Start setting boundaries, start small and then let them get gradually bigger. I, for one, love the Korean spa. It is amazing. I take my journal. It's like a $30 day pass. It's amazing. If you're on a budget, that's the thing to do. Or if you're just staying home, then turn everything on fucking airplane mode and play some, I don't know, cello music and take a bath and scrub your legs and then give yourself like a leg massage and then, I don't know, make yourself a healthy, delicious homemade meal and journal about how strong you are. And then maybe later in that night, watch like all happy ending movies, marathon. I don't know. Nurturing looks different for everyone. But just take small steps into reclaiming your identity. I listen to the curiosities of my spirit so hard now. I have shared before, I am learning how to play the cello. I I am not good at roller skating, but I have roller skates. I fall all the fucking time. Like a toddler. My cello teacher says that I am a second grader with honors. I am I've done a few pole classes and am not good and can't wait to get better. Like, listen to the curiosities of your spirit and do shit that makes your soul smile. And another tip for building courage is create an exit strategy. Do your emotional preparation, do your financial planning. And when I say emotional preparation, I mean like this is going to be trying, it's going to be hard, it's going to be sad, but your peace, like it's going to be worth it. And another part of that exit strategy is identifying safe spaces to go. So, here are the last questions of reflection to ask yourself or think on or suggest to somebody else. What's your biggest fear about leaving? And is it based on reality or what you've been led to believe? When was the last time you truly felt like yourself? And what would it take to get back to that version of you? And what would your life look like if you stayed versus if you left? Also, remember to be like gentle and kind to yourself because there's no like right timeline to leave. There's no textbook like this is how many years you're gonna be in a bad relationship. This is when you leave. Like it just there's no right timeline. So just be kind to yourself. Now, I did do a whole Friday flow affirmations and stream of consciousness about your intuition, knowing and trusting your intuition. But here's one to use. I deserve a life where love feels safe, uplifting, and true. Now, as I said earlier, I am not a licensed therapist, counselor, coach, anything like that. But you know what I can suggest are resources that can help in this situation or after the situation. First, here's a couple books. The first one is Why Does He Do That? Inside Minds of Angry and Controlling Men by Lundy Bancroft. Another book, this one I actually is on my buy list, is The Body Keeps Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. And there's therapist creator accounts. They exist, trust me. One of them is Nedra Glover Tawab. She's a licensed therapist specializing in boundaries, relationships, and healing. And the content is very accessible and it has supportive insights. Another creator is a holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera. So she's a clinical psychologist who shares valuable tools on healing, self-awareness, and personal transformation through trauma work. There's also hotlines and support groups. Okay, so you have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, that's 800-799-7233, thehotline.org, and that offers free and confidential support via phone or chat. Okay, you have crisis text line. You text HOME, HOME, to 741741. Free 24/7 support for anyone in crisis, including those experiencing domestic violence and emotional distress. Then we have support groups. Okay, basically, wherever you are, you can search domestic violence support groups near me, but you have the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. That's ncadv.org, and you can look for shelter referrals. There's local domestic violence shelters. And these shelters and crisis centers frequently have support groups for survivors of emotional, physical, or financial abuse. I hope somebody got something from this, whether it's someone like supporting a friend navigating this or someone figuring it out that they deserve to be cherished and respected and valued just as they are. I'm in a good place mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I'm able to talk about this stuff. And it helps me. I think it's very healing for me to know or hope that this can help someone feel less alone too. So thank you for allowing me to do that. I hope you're safe. I send you love. I send you warmth. And if you're one of those people who are figuring it out and wanting to leave, I believe in you. You have way more fucking strength than you know. You can fucking do this.